USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
As I tell my kids, it takes a special kind of dumbass to flunk out of college when you're looking at Vietnam. So that's what I was going to LSU and totally dissatisfied, and you know, and I one day I read I was in the cafeteria, and I read in the paper about this guy got a Congressional Medal of Honor, and they were talking about he got the Medal of Honor, and he stayed behind and fought the guys off where his buddies could get away, and he died in the process. You know, that's what we call it, coffin with metal handles. But anyway, and I got to thinking, I'm sitting there on my butt here in the lounge at LSU, and I got this guy off in the jungle fighting. I said, we have like a warrior class or something that goes do that or what? And so I just and I just wondered if I was made of that, what I was made of. I said, 21-year-old, 20-year-old. And so, and then I went and started exploring around. I found out that the Army had a thing where you could actually join the Army and not be an officer and fly helicopters. And so I said, okay, that sounds like my plan. I'd like to do that. The Army did what they said. They gave me a chance to fly a helicopter. It was like 6 weeks of testing. I did that, and then it came time to fly the helicopter, and you had to solo in 13 hours. Well, I wasn't ready to do it right then, and so they said, well, we got another place for you. And so January 1st of 1969, I wound up at Fort Ord, California at their advanced infantry training. Finished that in about the first week in March and went home for a week, and then Republic of Vietnam, here I come. So caught a plane in Oakland, went to Alaska, and I never forget, they opened the doors in Alaska, said, well, you guys get to walk around because it's going to be, the next flight's going to be a long one into Vietnam, and it was like 28 degrees, so holy mackerel. So anyway, we went and got back in the plane and flew in, and we got into Vietnam. I think it's like Benoit, Long Binh, one of those places where they come in. And it's like 6 o'clock in the evening. I tell this story. I thought about that. The pilot opened the fresh air vents, and you could, we were looking down at the window. You could see where the smoke was burning. What they were, it was crap burning. You could smell, and it really stunk, and it's really hot. And so when he opened those vents, I went, oh my God! And you realization about Vietnam. It stinks and it's hot. So we anyway, we got off the plane. We was in a little holding area, and they we had 2 planefuls that went in, and I said, okay, and we got off and had 1 plane full going back, and I went, I wonder what happened to the other plane full. We're making swaps here, So anyway, that's how I wound up in Vietnam, and it's 6 o'clock in the afternoon and hot. It was all an adventure. I mean, you was all sitting there like a herd of cattle, moving you around, and they knew where they wanted you to go and do this, and you just, okay, whatever. When I was in the back, I was pumping everybody for trying to find out, what about this, what about that, and old boy told me, said, you're a big guy. I said, what you need to do is get the machine gun when you get out there in the field, volunteer to take that gun. That way you walk in the middle and you won't be walking point. You stand a lot better chance of getting out of there. I said, sound like a plan. There's me and my buddy Mingo. That's the first day I got to Vietnam in the field. So boy, Harold Mingo out of New Orleans, he caught 4 Claymore bullets, BBs in the ankle. But now our focus is, you see my eyes are kind of bright and shiny and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I got a picture later on there. That's the one I want to show you. Look at the difference in the eyes on this guy and the eyes when he first got there.
And was this about 5 months in?
Yeah, probably 4 or 5 months in, yeah, something like that. And you see I got the canteen, there's 100 rounds there, 100 rounds there, 100 rounds on. I'm carrying 300 rounds. Plus a gun, plus a towel, t-shirt.
Well, in the edit room, we could put the 2 photos side by side.
Yeah, yeah, that's what you'll see. Yeah. The difference in what 5.5, 6 months will do for you. Yeah, I've been there probably in the field probably 3 or 4 weeks, I'm guessing, and they've been a shot fired. And I'm like, they gonna have a war here or what? I mean, and then we had a couple of little things where we had spottings and ran into them, but nobody was shot and killed or anything like that. And so guys were telling us, don't worry, when you go into Dragon Valley, you'll see. And Dragon Valley was the hellhole of our area, and I don't know how many other people wound up there. But anyhow, so we went in Dragon Valley, and they hadn't got off the helicopter good, and you know, people started shooting, you know, we were on the edge of the rice paddy, looking up in the kind of jungle, and got some fire out of the jungle. We was, like I said, we were at the edge of the jungle, and somebody shoot, and I didn't say, I shot him. And I said, what am I shooting at? You know, I didn't see anything, you know, and I didn't know, but that was pretty much the way most of our deal was. And you're in the jungle, and it's close quarters, and you know, I mean, and it's thick, and you can't see. And I think 3 times during my time in Vietnam, we wound up in Dragon Valley, and we'd go for a week at a time. This is when we was in a decent place, and the Boom Boom girls would come out and all that. The Coke girls, Boom Boom girls. All right, you read that?
Yep.
Doofus Dick, AKA Killer McKeller. That's the story behind him. Doofus Dick is what we called him, because he his equipment was rattling around, and you know, he could never get his stuff organized. But anyway, he was walking point and I was walking second, and we walked into some crap up there. And the first thing you do is hit the ground. You know, there's none of this jack around and go shoot somebody. No, you get on the ground. So we was on the ground, and I looked, old Killer McKeller, he was shooting, dodged, run to another tree shooting. I said, man, this guy looked like John Wayne. And we started calling him Killer McKeller. Because he had actually gotten shot, a bullet had grazed his wrist. And he said, and after it's all over, he said, look, I'm hit. That ain't bad enough for a Purple Heart, don't worry about it. He was bleeding, but this is when we stopped. We were out eating some lurps. That's the only time we ever had any lurps. I want you to know, to see the sweat. I mean, everything's wet with sweat and unkept, you know, I mean, just, oh, look, we did our best to count, that's the flag of Iwo Jima.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
Worst day in Vietnam, we'd been in Dragon Valley about 4 days, 5, whatever it was, and it rained, you're wallowing waist deep everywhere, you know, and we were in Dragon Valley, and the whole day had just been getting shot at. You know, we never were in a named battle. It was always 3 or 4, platoon would be like, let's say 18 to 22 people, 23 people. And the first 3 or 4 guys in the line would want to they'd get in there and mix it up, and the guys back in the back like, you know, but then it'd go away, and you know, they were just it's kind of a harassing. But anyway, we'd been going through that all day, and at night, came at just about dark, we came to a little high ground. We was waiting in the rice paddy, you know, we came to a little high ground. And Paul Espinoza was the point man. He had been an RTO, but he wanted to walk point because he was tired of being an RTO. So he was walking point, and we were up in this thing, and I don't know how big it was or whatever, but he said, everybody freeze, it's mine. So we stopped, and he said, and he had his foot on it, but the mud is soft, and he hadn't put enough pressure to blow it, to make it blow. So, you know, I didn't say, the platoon sergeant said, put your helmet on it and get down on your knees and see if you can find any more. So we all crawled around on the hands and knees, and we found 3 or 4 of these things, you know, place big as this room here, you know. And you take it off, put your hat over it, that way somebody else wouldn't get on it, you know, but it got dark. So now the platoon sergeant said, look, let's just anchor in here tonight, you know, da-da-da. So we were going to have a peaceful night. We was in a minefield, but as long as nobody moved around, we were going to be okay, you know. and so we were there, and I never forget, my buddy Jenkins, LeVar Jenkins, put a piece of poncho so we can keep the rain off of us, and we would put that poncho, and so I'd take my boots, I pulled my boots off, half my sock came off with the boot, and half of it stayed on my foot. And there was something in the rice paddy, you know, just rotted or what, I don't know. But anyway, he had a spare pair of socks, he gave them to me. Well, oh my God, think about I mean, just how good a spare pair of socks is, you know. And so anyway, we were doing that, and I was listening to platoon sergeant, he on the radio, and the company commander called him, said, look, you know, first of all, we could hear it's about maybe a quarter or half a mile from us. We could hear all hell break loose. Somebody was in a hell of a damn scrap. And the company commander called us, said, you need to, our battalion commander said, you need to take your people and go down, help Delta Company. I said, man, we ain't sitting in a minefield. He said, and they went back and forth. He said, that's a direct order, get up and leave, go help Delta Company. So the platoon sergeant said, okay, let's everybody saddle up, we got to go. And then platoon sergeant crawled over to where I was, and he said, hey, it says, Charlie, I want your squad to lead us out of here. I went, thanks. And so I went, I had my 2-point men, Joe Brown out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and Fat Matt Carrasco, and I went, those my 2-point men. I went and said, hey guys, somebody got to lead us out here tonight. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I ain't got the nerve, and we're gonna draw straws. If you don't want to do it, I ain't gonna think no less of you. I'll give you an Article 15, but you know. So anyway, Stroud and Matt drew it, and he said, I'll do it. So he pointed out at mine. I walked second. There's Fat Matt. But anyway, so I'm holding on to this pack. Somebody's holding on to mine. We got up and left, and like as a whole, by then the company had joined us, and we told them watch out for the helmets and all this stuff. And so we come out of that minefield, and it's at night, and it was so dark that it had been raining so hard. They had a little river run along where we were. And my job was holding Matt. He was walking point, but I had him by the pack. You'd be walking along there and step off in that river. You know, you were just in. I mean, you couldn't believe how thick it was. Excuse me, how thick it was. But he'd slip off in that river, and I'd have him by the pack, and I'd drag him back out. You know, and he said, "Let's go this way." And so we'd try. It took off, but anyway, we stayed awake all night long, trying to get to him, and we never got to him. And you could hear blah 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 shooting back and forth. And about daylight, it broke off. They quit. And the company commander said, y'all can rest right there. So I laid down about 6 inches of water. I was done. I mean, it was done, 24 hours. And very stressful. When we left the base camp, we didn't have a cot, a bed, or anything for 90 days. We slept on the ground for 90 days. The rain, we got our ass wet. Got wet. It was dry, we were thirsty. Hot, we were hot. You know, but for 90 days we were out in the field. Now some of that time, one time I was telling, we guarded Tam Key Bridge, and that was our crip duty. You know, we could go out there and we didn't have to go anywhere, so we got 6 days guarding Tam Key Bridge. Like, boy, all it was about, kind of an R&R, you know. Mm-hmm. On that 90-day cycle, you'd have 3 days that'd take you back to Chulai Beach and had 24-hour porn videos, bands, drunk. You had steaks on the grill all the time, and we get treated like kings for 3 days, you know. So that guy right there was the best platoon sergeant ever. He named Russell Fairchild, but he was our platoon sergeant and platoon leader for most of the time, because we had 4 different lieutenants while I was there. They always got capped, and he'd take over before they'd send another. But anyway, all right, right there. So boy, that's me with a gun. And that guy right there is Lurch, old boy from California, about 6'5". What you can't see is we're sitting on top of about 100-foot waterfall, and that's people down below. And we wound up spending about a day getting down that. There's ropes. Everybody had to climb down the rope to get to the waterfall. That's me on we call that no names hut. The old boy that he had a well there, and we go take a bath in his well in the daytime. That's the top of this mountain, 1362. But my only experience of climbing up in a tunnel. But that's on top of 1362, an old Green Beret base, and they landed us in there, and our deal was to walk down side of that mountain and flush out anything for people waiting down below. So we're going down, and of course it was all clear, and look, and there was a hole in the ground going back on the side of the mountain, going back in there. So okay, now what we're going to do? So everybody standing there and looked at everybody with a finger in their ear, you know, like somebody got to go in there and look. And I was carrying the 60, the gun. I said, give me a rifle and a flashlight, I'll go. So I crawled down in this thing, and it went about 20 feet back in there. You could see, I couldn't get up on my hands and knees, but I had plenty of room to squirm. I got back in there, and I got to the corner. There was a corner, and if anybody's gonna be there, that's where they'd be, you know. So I crawled down there, and first thing I did, I took and shined the light around the corner. Nobody shot the light out of my hand. I flipped my rifle around behind the light, and nobody shot my rifle. So I eased up there and looked, and there wasn't anybody in there. Okay, good, I'm glad. And so, it was, and what it wasn't a place where the bad guys were storing. Some farmer or person had hidden their stuff there when they moved out of the mountains and went to the coast. But one of the things in there was a big old vase. It's about 13 inches tall and about 10 inches in diameter or something. Beautiful vase. And I didn't know boo diddly about it, but I said, I know this is a pretty thing. So I came crawling, I wrapped it in my arm, and I came crawling back out of the hole. And when I did, I saw where I tripped a booby trap going in, and it hadn't gone off. And somebody put a wire across and I could see it in the sun, where the sun bound, but I couldn't see it coming in. So I just slipped on by that thing, just and I hope it stays dormant while I'm here. because that would kill me deader than hell. But anyhow, so I came out and had this vase, and I wrapped it in my poncho. We was traveling, we was working light that day, so I humped it back up the mountain. And it was the only time when I was in Vietnam I actually threw up from exhaustion, and I'd been there a long time. I was just totally, well, I started to throw that vase away a half dozen times. About the time we came in, the helicopter came in, and of course, like a UPS man, you get to know. I said, hey, send this home to my mama, and he said, okay, I'll do it. About a month later, my mama said, we got this vase came in the mail. I said, I'll explain it when we get home. So anyway, it sat on my dresser drawer for like 10 years, and then threw in a couple of wives, and just the last one when we got married. She said, what is that? And I told her the story. She said, that thing's got to be worth something. I said, nah. But anyway, we searched around, scratched around. We couldn't find anybody, but come to find out, we found an antique Chinese art dealer in New Orleans. And it's a Ming Dynasty. This thing was made before Columbus was coming out. It wasn't assigned, it was like an everyday kind of jug, So I don't know what it's worth, but it's worth more than the world to me, After 5.5 months, they promoted me up to E5 to a squad leader. Of course, I didn't get E5. That's the way you do it. You be a squad leader, and then I don't even know exactly the date, but somewhere like June or July, something like that. They came out and they were looking for some snipers. Sniper teams go out at night with a starlight scope. So I said, okay. So I volunteered for that. Went back to the rear and trained as a sniper for about 3 days. It was really intense training. Set a 105 canister out there and shoot at it for about 150 yards, and like, oh, you hit it, you'll be good, go ahead. That's me with my sniper rifle. You see I got my damn Ho Chi Minh race, I'm drying out, got my boots off, and my pot. And anyway, it started raining, the rainy season came, of course that starlight, it wasn't good on rainy nights, so cloud, dark. So gave the starlight back up and returned to squad leader duty. And I was always squad leader, but just on a clear night, we'd take the sniper team would go out, a little 3-man team. So first night in 3 weeks, it hadn't been rainy and cloudy, and I could actually lay on my rack. I had the way you do it, just lay back, and I looked up and you see the stars and the moon. It's just partly cloudy, it's beautiful. And all of a sudden, I got this premonition, like, you're gonna get hit, you're gonna get shot. And I couldn't figure out what it was at first. It was like this. And I know it sounded BS, but the aura of coming in, I went, holy mackerel, and then but I stayed awake all night. I watched everybody change and rotate the guards and all that stuff, and I just sit there at peace. This great peace came over me out for whatever reason. So at daylight, we packed up, we knew where we had to go, and I described like mules going back to the barn, we got all the trip players and claymores in and all that stuff, and first sergeant was there. Stroud, how's it going? I'm going all right. I said, look, hey, Top, I'm supposed to go in R&R tomorrow. You need to get me out of the field today. He said, why? I said, because I'm getting ready to get shot. He said, oh, boy. And he went by laughing. I said, no, I'm serious, we're going to get shot. And just about the time that conversation was happening, I heard an explosion 400 or 500 yards off. And I heard it, and I said, that's Horton. That's Horton's group coming in. They hit something. So I told Top, I said, I'm going to get my guys and go. Now, this whole thing took 1 minute from me telling him that I was going to get shot to a minute left. I'm headed out there to help these guys. So we took off, jogging out across his flat rice bed and got 300 or 400 yards, something like that, a little grassy, a little brushy knoll right there. And that's where these boys were. And I knew where they were from the path they were supposed to come in. And about that time, I'd been jogging the whole time out there. About that time, the dog handler caught up with me. He'd been out with us the night before. He said, hey, let me put this dog on point. That sounded like a good idea. So anyway, for the last 50 yards, something like that, the dog walked point, the handler, and me behind him. And we walked right up to where the lieutenant was and his group. And when we walked up to, you could smell gunpowder, and I looked over to the right. My buddy Jenkins had a point man that had his lower leg, foot blown off, and Jenkins was working on him. And then behind the lieutenant had another guy, had him propped up, had a hole, I don't say big as a quarter, maybe, and you stick your finger in it, through his neck, and he had him propped up, and this sounds weird. I had a Donald Trump moment. The point man was standing there. Of course, I didn't want to move my feet, so I did like this around him. I said, Luke, where do you want my people? and he was turning around. I was watching him about that time. I think the dog stepped on it or some stepped forward or whatever. Anyway, it went off. Piece of shrapnel cut all the hair off my head and burned a whelp on it. I had like a blue whelp on that thing from just that. If I'd have been had my head up, caught me between the eyes. But anyway, that and had a piece went through the crotch of my pants and did no damage. And, and two greatest blessings I think I could have, you know. And I tell all my grandkids, had that thing been that much harm, shame on me, he wouldn't be here. But so anyway, it blew up, and I'm flying back through the air, and hit the ground, and the main thing, I had my hand on my head and my crotch. That's what it was really burning, and everything else, and I was, looked, no blood anywhere. I said, okay, I guess I'm good. And about that, and I heard this guy screaming and hollering over on the other side. I said, I got to help him. I tried to get up, and I felt my leg, ain't no way I'm gonna get up on this leg. And of course, I still had my pants on and all that kind of stuff. And Fat Matt came and ran up behind me and said, he said, where you hit? I said, in the leg. And he started cutting clothes off of me and all that stuff. And I asked him, hey Matt, how bad is it? I didn't want to look. He said, how bad? That's all right. I said, okay, you told me all I need to know. So I heard the helicopter come in, and Matt said, let me go get somebody to help load you up on the helicopter. I said, all right. So he took off. And I tell the story, I was laying there, and it just, there's still stuff all happening all around, people carrying people to the helicopter. And I thought, I had this thing, this great, they're gonna leave me, and I'm like, oh my God. But there wasn't nothing I could do. So Matt came back, he said, ain't nobody to help me. Wait a minute. He said, there ain't nobody to help me, I'm gonna carry you by myself. I said, Matt, it ain't no way. He said, I'll get you. The guy, I outweighed him 30 pounds and at least 4 or 6 inches taller. He got me up off the ground by himself and took me to the helicopter. I mean, I never have cried about that, but anyway. So Matt, he took me to the helicopter, and when they shoved me up on the helicopter, they propped me up against somebody. I don't know who it was, and about halfway, Matt had me in this thing where my legs were flopped over to the back, and I was holding on to his shoulder. I could see my right leg was flopping like a fish tail, and it was hurting. And Jenkins came, LeVar came running. He had already loaded his man. He came up and was holding my leg, and they went and put me on the helicopter. And probably, like I said, I was propped up against somebody. I don't even know who it was. And old boy had the piece and the hole in his throat. He had him propped up over there, on the other side. I asked him, I said, you gonna make it, man? Yeah, I'm gonna make it. And he did. So, but anyway, the helicopter took off and got us back to, went to the, I think it was 93rd evac in July. I'm trying to remember now. And, but anyway, I was the last one on the helicopter. I guess I was the least hit. And so they were taking people off them. When they drug me off the helicopter, I looked and they had checker plate all on the bottom. It's only if you're a Vietnam vet knows, the whole bottom of the thing was completely covered with blood. You could see a little piece of it sticking up. But anyway, they drug me off, put me on a stretcher, hauled me in, and we went through these rubber things, where the air, keep the air out. And walked in there, and that thing, hell, I guess it's probably about 90 degrees outside, and it's about 12 degrees inside. No, it was cold. I don't know, about probably 68 degrees, and it was like, holy mackerel. And pulled me in there, and the nurses, they had 3 nurses jumped on me with big old scissors. They was just cutting everything off of me, cutting all my clothes, and they were rolling me around, looking for places where it came out and stuff like that, And so anyway, they checked me out. It wasn't their first rodeo. You could tell they knew exactly what they were doing. And I looked over, and old boy had his foot blown off. He had his leg off on the side of the bed, and had a bucket under it. So I'm like, okay, that'll work. I was thinking to myself, that's very efficient. There's Fat Matt, my hero.
Hey, got it.
I mean, he was a hero. I stayed in Vietnam like 5 days at Chu Lai, and then about 4 or 5 days later, they loaded me on a plane and sent me down to Cam Ranh Bay. That's what it was. But then from Cam Ranh Bay to Japan, stayed in Japan for like a month, 5 weeks. And this is all right around Christmas. On Christmas Day, I never forget, on Christmas Day I woke up and where my shin bone had been shattered, they'd stitched it up and it tight, but then when Christmas Day it was all swollen and looked like an old football. Somebody put too much air in, all the threads were stretched across the hole, and a piece of bone was sticking out of the bloody hole, a piece of bone was sticking out of it. And I called the corpsman over, hey man, look at this. Yeah, he went and got his forceps, just grabbed it, blink, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I guess I don't need that anymore. And so, but anyway, it was like middle of January or late January, something like that. They shipped me to Fort Polk in Louisiana. While I was in the ward there at the hospital at Fort Polk, I was having all kind of, I guess, PTS issues, and PTS. And I was like having weird, and I said I need to talk to some shrink somewhere. I need it. This is my mind's going. I'm going crazy with this stuff. And so okay. About 4 days later, had this little guy showed up and had 2 stripes on his coat there, and pulled the curtain down. So, Mr. Stroud, I'm here to check on you for PTSD, blah blah blah. And I said, you're not a doctor, are you? He said, no. I said, you ever been in combat? You ever been shot? No. So I said, get your ass out of here. I ain't got nothing to say to you. And because he didn't know, so I said, and it pissed me off, and I'll just do this on my own, and that's basically what my whole rehab was like, do it on my own. So they sent me to Brooks Army Hospital, and they made me this splint, and it'd be now it'd be called an exoskeleton. When I got back, the Army basically turned me over to the VA, and I talked to the doctor. I said, look, when can I get this brace off? He said, son, that's as good as it's gonna get. I said, you done, and I'm like, holy mackerel. I mean, it's like, I couldn't, I never envisioned myself being crippled like that, so. Well, I decided I did do something. So I went out and bought me a bicycle, an old used bicycle. I think it was $9 I paid for it. And I put it on. We was staying in a mobile home at that point, and a big old wooden porch, and I propped up on the edge of the porch. I'd sit on the porch, take the braces off, get on the bicycle and ride the bicycle. And I did that, and then I got to where I could hold on to the bicycle and walk. And then I got to where I could turn the bicycle loose. And it took about, I won't say a year and a half, 2 years, and but I was mobile. And I will never forget, I was digging through my closet like a year or so later and saw that brace. I took it and threw it out in the garbage. I wish I'd held on to it, but took it and threw it out in the closet. Out in the garbage. So from then forward, I've just been doing what I can. On a personal basis, I absolutely proved to myself who I was, which has been a great confidence builder or whatever for the last 55 years, knowing who you are and knowing what your limits are and what you can do if you have to. So yeah, I'm very proud. I wear my hat, that Purple Heart hat, like I got wounded, and I spent like 7 months in the hospital, but I'm alive. They got 58,000 young men died in Vietnam, and I guarantee you go ask half the people in the United States about Vietnam, it'll probably be a war somewhere, They don't know, but like I said, there's a huge amount of young men died for nothing because of politics. So.